Okay, so it's about 5 minutes after the hour, so we'll go ahead and people can still kind of join us, but we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you everyone for coming in here tonight. I know your time is valuable, but this is also a very important topic, so I thank you for being here and for taking the initiative to learn more about how to better take care of your children. So the topic today, yes, it's going to be what every parent should know about nearsightedness. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Ingrid Lorenzana. I am a pediatric neurodevelopmental optometrist. And I have extensive experience over 25 years. So we did our webinar last week, and Dr. Garrett, my colleague who you see here, joined me. And then we wanted to repeat it, and there were some people who weren't able to join, so we wanted to do it again tonight. And unfortunately, he was not available today. But I didn't want you guys to miss out. So I went ahead and, just held the webinar again. And then we could also do a future one that Dr. Garowitz will join us, but I will do his part. Obviously, I won't do it as good as him, but I will still share the part that he would have done for us. So again, nearsightedness. Most often you hear nearsightedness, farsightedness. But nearsightedness, when we talk about it in medical terms, the medical term that we use to define it is myopia. So myopia and nearsightedness are really one and the same, and I'll probably use those terms interchangeably here throughout the webinar. So what is nearsightedness? And so when I talk to my patients and parents, I know there's a lot of confusion between am I farsighted, am I nearsighted? How do I know the difference? So I always recommend that you go by where you can see clearly when you're not wearing glasses. So if I'm nearsighted, that means I can see it near if I don't have glasses, and I don't see far away. The inverse is true for farsightedness, but for the topic of today, for the purposes of tonight, we're going to talk about the nearsightedness. Some people also refer to it as short-sightedness, or the myopia. So why does myopia happen? So the big thing that I think that we are recognizing today is that kids' eyes are changing way too fast. And so what happens is when the kids are born, just like their body is not fully grown, neither is their eyes. And so we see this huge growth spurt from the time that a baby is born until about, a huge growth spurt in those first 9 to 10 years. And so what we see is that these children, as their bodies are growing, we want their eyes to grow with them. And so when we talk about a prescription in the eyes, what happens is when we are farsighted, the eye is too small. So it makes sense that when kids are born, their eyes are not fully grown, so they're farsighted. And as they continue to grow, their bodies and their eyes grow simultaneously. And so when we talk about these prescriptions in a child's eyes, we always talk about think of it like the algebraic numeric line, right? The algebraic numeric line has the plus side, it has the 0, and then it has the minus side. When we transfer and we give the analogy to a prescription in your eye, the plus side would be the farsighted people. The people at the 0 are those people that don't need glasses. And then the people on the minus are the people that are nearsighted. And so when a child is born, traditionally, they're born somewhere on the plus, somewhere around +4, +5. And we want them to go from like +5 to +4 to +3 as they're getting older and older. So traditionally, we wanted this to be the trend and the goal that we used when I first started practicing 27 years ago. I remember the goal was, hey, if we get them to be at 0 by the time they're 7, we're great because they're going to stay there. And for the earlier parts of my career, I will tell you that that's what I would see. And if anything, as a doctor, I always monitor, hey, are they staying too farsighted because their eye's not growing fast enough? What we're seeing that's happening now, actually, though, is that this growth is actually happening too fast. And so these kids are moving from the plus side onto the zero and actually into the minus side. And so the concern now is that before we were worried, hey, it's not changing fast enough, their eyes not growing fast enough. Now the concern is, hey, they're growing too fast. And so what's attributing to these changes of why are children's eyes changing so much more fast than before? And what we're seeing is that because we have changed habitually as a society, our anatomy is actually changing to meet those new needs, right? So I remember, my kids are now in their 20s, but when they were little, I remember we didn't have the internet. As funny as that sounds. We used to go to the park every day. We didn't have digital devices. I don't even think we got cable until they were in their teens. And so we were outside, we played more, we did more things. We didn't have as much technology in our hands. And so this becomes really, really critical, especially in those first 5 years of life, because one of the ways that a child's brain and their vision develops is by exploring their environment. And so if I'm little Tommy and I'm sitting over here, and then across the room I see there's a cat and the cat's moving from side to side, that's going to motivate me to want to go and engage with that cat, and I'm going to go grab it and try to catch it. And so that stimulation where my world was out there also motivated me as a child to move in space, move in my environment, allowed me to be more coordinated, and therefore my body and my brain were more in sync with each other. I learned to be more mobile. And so what's happening now, because we're using so much technology, we've taken this world that was over there and we've put it right front and center in front of the child's vision. So what's happened? There's no motivation for the child to explore the environment, to go and move. It impacts their development. I saw a huge regression in development in a lot of my patients last year with all the confinement due to the pandemic, where they didn't get to live as they needed to live. And so we see that on a day-to-day basis. And I also see that trend happening more with my patients, that children are having more sensory issues and more things like that because they need to be out more. They need to be exploring more. We're using, not only technology in the classroom at a much younger age, but now we're also using it leisurely for younger and younger ages. And so that's, our environmental changes are really having an impact how our anatomy is changing. And as a matter of fact, last year, this research study was published that was instrumental in what's going on. And so the goal of this study was a study created in China. They started in 2015, and they were going to follow kids for a 5-year period through 2020. And what they originally wanted to do was, hey, let's look at the trajectory of the 5 years and see, and we are going to take children who are 6 to 8 years old. We're going to give them 1 hour of digital e-learning activities, and we're going to compare them to the 9, 13 years old. We're going to give that older group 2.5 hours of digital e-learning activities, and we want to see which group develops more nearsightedness. That was the original intention. What ended up happening was that because of the pandemic, especially last year in the first 6 months of the year, they decided, well, you know what? Let's compare the first 4.5 years of the study when there was no pandemic, and we'll compare it to the later 6 months of the study, which was the first 6 months of 2020, and we'll see if there's a difference in there, because now we had this last 6 months with the pandemic and the confinement, and we'll see. And curiously enough, what ended up happening was that the group that was 6 to 8 years old, so all these kids did definitely have a progression in the nearsightedness. But the 6-year-olds had a 3-time fold change in their nearsightedness compared to the 9 to 13-year-olds. The 7 to 8-year-olds had it 2 times. And so even though, like I earlier said, the older kids did more e-learning, it wasn't as much about the e-learning as it was the combination of the digital devices with the age is really what the instrumental piece of this ended up being. That the younger a child is using a device, the more that it's going to advance the development of the nearsightedness and definitely impact their overall development. So this was a really, really valuable study and very timely. We were already on the concern, and that's why the study was in line, but the pandemic just kind of, made it for the perfect situation. And so it was of great value.